Did the Denver Nuggets address a major need with their handful of moves at the conclusion of the NBA draft? Will one of the new faces here at Ball Arena manage to make their way onto the roster consistently? And could the Colorado Avalanche be considering a potential reunion with a former Stanley Cup champion? All things to come on today's rundown, but we will begin in the NBA, where the Denver Nuggets, led by their co-executive vice president team of Ben Tenzer and John Wallace, did not make a selection in the first or second round of the NBA draft, but they did make two signings in undrafted free agent territory that could potentially help them this season. Now, their first undrafted free agent signing came by way of the University of Missouri, and he was a pretty prolific shooter by all means in the SEC. He was the NCAA or the SEC leader in free throw percentage at 94.6% and shot astoundingly 220 for 238 over 4 years in college at the University of Missouri. He led the SEC in free throws over the last 2 years, starting all 34 games for the Tigers. They also made a signing of the Big 12's sixth man of the year by the name of Curtis Jones, who is a top 5 scorer in the Big 12, averaging just over 17 points per game, and somebody that, from a shooting percentage standpoint, seems to be proficient, dare I say, in an area that the Nuggets are clearly lacking, and that is three-point shooting percentage. Curtis Jones, as I mentioned, averaged about 17.5 points per game, shot 43% from the field, and 37% from beyond the arc. Now, Tamar Jones, their first signing, topped that, maybe not in a points per game standpoint, from a shooting efficiency standpoint, significantly so. Take a look at his numbers. Tamar Bates, 13.3 points per game, 50.8 field goal percentage, shooting better than 50% from the field, just under 40% from three, and as I mentioned before, 95% from behind, from the charity stripe. So both of these guys are looking at two-way contracts, potential G League contributions, but with 3 open spots on the roster, in theory, one or both of these players could find their way, if they play well and maximize their opportunities, into a contribution spot, the likes of which the Nuggets have seen before. Remember this: Monte Morris, PJ Dozier, Torrey Craig, Marcus Howard, Bol, and Devon Reed. All players who found their way onto the Denver Nuggets roster in the exact same or very similar fashion to the way that these two new Nuggets are now finding their way. So reliable contributions are there to be had in the undrafted free agent, two-way contract, and G League route, the way that the Nuggets have gone this season without any draft capital to speak of. So for Tamar Bates and Curtis Jones, in theory, their skill sets represent areas where the Nuggets are deficient, and it is possible, given the recent history of players who've come through the doors of Ball Arena in the same fashion and made their way onto the court in meaningful minutes, for 2 of these players, at least one, to maybe fill one of the 3 available spots left on this roster. We will have to wait and see as Summer League gets ready to kick off, where Deron Holmes will be participating, according to Ben Tenzer and John Wallace just earlier this week, and then what other potential free agent moves, either through a taxpayer mid-level exception or another potential veteran free agent signing around the league minimum, the Nuggets can make ahead of the 2025 season. For the Colorado Avalanche, who are also in their off-season mode with the NHL Draft right around the corner, there's a little bit of buzz about bringing back a former familiar face here in town, someone who was a part of the Stanley Cup team, and that is Bowen Byram, who was shipped out of town as a part of the Casey Middlestat trade and is now with the Buffalo Sabres. where he's coming off of a career year, by the way, 38 points, 7 goals, and 31 assists, and is kind of a hot commodity in terms of suitors and bidders for his services in the NHL's open market. Now, Bo is likely going to want to be paid by whatever team he lands with next if he is indeed on his way out of Buffalo. And the Avalanche, sitting with $1.2 million in cap space as it currently stands, probably aren't the best suited, definitely aren't the best suited to be able to do that. But if they were to make a trade that involves Samuel Girard, who they've been shopping for a number of years now, or potentially a Ross Colton, a Josh Manson, or a Marty Necas, all players who in theory could find themselves in a trade scenario. Charlie Coyle's name has been mentioned in that regard as well, someone who's due $5.25 million on the 1 year remaining on his contract with the Avalanche. In theory, they could free up some space in order to do that. I don't think, given the amount of suitors and attention that Bowen Byram is going to get on the open market if he is indeed shopped, I don't think the Avalanche are in prime position to try to make a run at him without making some other significant moves, and trading the likes of a Sammy G or a Josh Manson for another fellow defenseman, albeit a defenseman on the right side of his early 20s who showed some promise at times and was a little bit up and down, you know, with concussion issues and things of that nature, but somebody that showed promise and was certainly missed at times given the lack of depth on the Avalanche's blue line. I don't think trading one defenseman out for another defenseman does really anything to help your depth issue, where they still find themselves thin, especially on that third pairing. But it is an intriguing prospect to bring back a young defenseman with a lot of upside, who might be a little bit expensive, but was already cemented as a part of one of the better teams in the history of this storied franchise. Someone who, if you'll remember, was mistaken championship parade for a fan and initially stopped and held up a little bit by police walking the route. So Bo Byram will always have fond memories, whether he makes his way back to town the way that Eric Johnson did. Whether he makes his way back to town or not, he will always be remembered fondly here. And even though his services could certainly be of use, it just doesn't quite seem like the Avalanche are ready and available to hire him for those services. We are on the doorstep of another big weekend in sports. Training camp 2025 inches its way closer. We now know that the fans are going to be able to be in attendance, 800, and the tickets for which you had to acquire in order to get attendance into Training Camp 2025 sold up within a matter of hours. Sold is a loose term. They were free like they have been in the last handful of years, but the attention and the demand is there, and now it's up to hopefully some generosity and some give backs on the secondary market if you weren't able to jump in on that craze in the early hours of Wednesday morning. But plenty of questions to be answered there. The NHL Draft is just around the corner. The Avalanche, if memory serves, don't have a pick until the 4th round, but still have some options that they can work with there. And we will see whether or not Chris McFarland's vision of reinvigorating the entire roster, essentially, starting with the goalie room and then going all the way through the center line depth from Nathan McKinnon to Brock Nelson, to Charlie Coyle, to Jack Drury, bringing in the likes of a Ryan Lindgren, a Marty Necas, even at the cost of Mikko Rantanen. We will see if that vision that was put together on the back half of a season will come to fruition with a full offseason under their belt and a full 82 and maybe soon to be 84 NHL games to get ready for a postseason push. Thank you all so much for joining us. Today was a very special episode. It was episode 100, number 100 of The Rundown, the show that we kicked off here on DenverSports 104.3 The Fan, the Monday after Super Bowl. And if you can believe it or not, we are 100 episodes in and have several hundred more planned in our future. Thank you again all so much for joining us. We will catch you again on Monday on a holiday week with a big 4th of July weekend coming up and plenty to discuss over the next 72 hours. We'll see you then.
I do what I love what I do. Second nature to put in the work.